Welcome back to our library, all Sherlock Holmes fans. In a previous video, I showed my 1893 edition of The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. Today, with my husband's help, I will be presenting first editions of the Memoirs of Sherlock Holmes and the Casebook of Sherlock Holmes. Here you can see the first edition of the Memoirs of Sherlock Holmes, which was published in 1894 by George Nunez. This luxurious edition is in fine condition. You can see the gold lettering, the gilded pages. It has its original end pages, as well as the original illustrations by Sidney Paget. Memoirs of Sherlock Holmes has 11 stories. The Adventures of Silver Blaze, The Adventures of Yellowface, The Adventures of the Stockbroker's Clerk, The Adventures of the Glorious Scot, The Adventures of Musgrave Ritual, The Adventures of Reigate Squire, The Adventures of the Crooked Man, The Adventures of the Resident Patient, The Adventures of the Good Interpreter, which is my personal favorite, where an interpreter comes to Sherlock Holmes very concerned for someone he just interpreted for, The Adventures of the Naval Treaty, and The Final Problem. While other books that contain Sherlock Holmes stories have 12 stories, the Memoirs of Sherlock Holmes, this edition, and many other editions, contain 11 because they do not contain the adventures of the cardboard box. Even though it was already written in 1892 and published in the Strand magazine, which originally published all Sherlock Holmes stories. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and George Nunez decided not to publish The Adventures of the Cardboard Box until 1917 because there was mention of adultery and they thought it would be inappropriate. In The Final Problem, Moriarty kills Sherlock Holmes at Reichenbach Waterfall in Switzerland. The Victorian public that were so enthralled by the Sherlock Holmes stories were devastated. They even wore mourning bands around their arms to show that they were mourning for the character of Sherlock Holmes, one of the first times a fictional character was mourned for in public. People stopped subscribing to the Strand magazine, and the Strand magazine asked Sir Arthur Conan Doyle to bring Sherlock Holmes back. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle originally had killed off Sherlock Holmes as he wanted to focus on other books and other characters. He requested a lot of money from the Strand to bring back Sherlock Holmes, thinking that they would never go for it. But they did give him the money to bring Sherlock Holmes back. 10 years after the Memoirs of Sherlock Holmes, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle came out with the novel Hound of the Baskervilles, which happened 3 years prior to The Final Problem. And then eventually, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle did bring back Sherlock Holmes in The Return of Sherlock Holmes in the story Empty House. This book, which you can see and we did see in the Broiler Club exhibit in New York City, really is the same edition that we saw there. There we also saw letters that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle wrote to his mother saying that he cannot say no to the money that the Strand was giving him to bring Sherlock Holmes back, even though his mother originally told him never to kill off Sherlock Holmes. We purchased this rare book that is in such fine condition from Sotheby's auction house. Next, we're moving on to the Casebook of Sherlock Holmes. Here you can see it has its original dust jacket. This was published in 1927 and it was published by John Moran. We also bought this from Sotheby's auction house. The stories in the Casebook of Sherlock Holmes include the adventures of the illustrious client, the adventures of the blanched soldier, the adventures of the Mazarin Stone, the adventures of the Three Gables, the adventures of the Sussex Vampire, which is a very creepy story I just reread, very interesting, where it seems that a woman is a vampire feeding off her baby, the adventures of the Three Garridebs, the problem of Thor Bridge, the adventures of the Creeping Man, also a very interesting and creepy story where a woman comes to Sherlock Holmes because her father has started to act very oddly, started crawling like an animal, scaling the house. The adventures of the Lion's Mane, the adventures of the Veiled Lodger, the adventures of Shoscombe Old Place, and the adventures of the Retired Colorman. Next time, in a different video, we hope to show you the first edition of The Return of Sherlock Holmes, as well as possibly the Hound of the Baskervilles, to really complete our Sherlock Holmes first edition collection. Thank you so much for watching, all Sherlock Holmes fans.